Hi, welcome to our Stay Woke Book Club for the month of March. My name is Karen Lemons.
Mr. Chico.
Miss Borum.
Okay, and we are here to discuss the book, The Playbook, 52 Rules to Aim, Shoot, and Score in This Game Called Life by Kwame Alexander. This is an inspirational book, a motivational book, and Kwame, what he does is he connects some sentences, words of inspiration with the game of basketball. In between there, he also tells wonderful stories of people who've overcome certain challenges, and it's an inspirational book, not only for the month of January, because as we think about New Year's resolutions and goals, but you could read this book in the middle of June to get reinvigorated or get remotivated, or to continue doing what it is that you all do so well. So I'm not going to spoil this by mentioning the wonderful things that I liked about this book. I'm going to start with Chico or Borum, either one.
I would start with Miss Borum.
Okay, we can start with Miss Borum because Miss Borum did kind of a bad thing. I was really impressed by the way that the book was put together. It was an easy read. There are a lot of pages, but that does not equal, I guess, the amount of content in the book. Mm-hmm. I immediately got the book and started reading through the rules. So there are literally 52 rules in the book. I feel like you could pick any one of them and kind of discuss it, or kind of apply it to maybe something that you've done in the last week. I have a couple favorites, but I think I can share those a little later. So I enjoyed this. I think that it's an easy read for a lot of our students or for young people.
I agree that there's a lot to like about this book, but there were some things that I didn't like as much about it. So first off, I don't read a ton of nonfiction, but if I do, I read about 2 or 3 a year, I'd say. When I do read it, what I like is narrative nonfiction. I want the story to drag me in. If you're going to give me rules, if you're going to give me information, I want the story behind it.
Gotcha.
And there are parts of this book that do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's parts where it's just him giving advice and that kind of thing. And it's okay and it's fine. It's great as a starter. It's great to get the conversation going. I think you're exactly right about that. But the parts where he's telling his story, where he's telling things that he went through, or when he's talking about professional athletes and what they went through, and how they connect to the different rules that he has, those parts I enjoyed a lot.
Right.
When it's page after page of, I'm going to be a little mean, a little bit generic on the advice.
Okay.
Work hard, practice, be kind. Okay. I mean, it's a Gatorade commercial. It's okay. It's great. It's a great starting point. I wanted something deeper than that. And when he connected it to his stories, to the athletes in there, I think Kareem's in there. Wilma Rudolph is in there. Athletes who went through things, and how the advice that he's giving applies to that. That's the kind of stuff that I dig, and I would have loved an entire book of that and less of the other stuff. Because while it is an easy read, there are parts that aren't. There's not enough there for me. I would have liked deeper advice. I would have liked stuff that's more specific, When he talks about switching up from basketball to tennis, that's cool. That's great. Because he found something that he really loved. He went outside the box. All that kind of stuff is great because there's a story behind it. When he says things like, be a good teammate or whatever, it doesn't mean as much because the narrative's not there. So that's the part of the book that annoyed me a little bit, and that's the part that I would have liked more of. I was kind of intrigued. I haven't read any of his other stuff, but I saw mentioned in there, it talks about other books he's written and that kind of thing. I'm kind of interested to check some of his other stuff to see which direction it goes in. If it's more of his narrative type stuff, I might be interested in checking that out. But this is the advice and the rules and stuff. I think you're right, it's definitely a good starting point you know. And you're right also that some of the advice is better than others. It's all great advice, it's all fine, but some of it means more than others, you know.
True. I would agree there. But we have to remember also, and when I read this, I kept thinking, yeah, this is more for a young adult or even middle school.
Yeah.
So,
You
know, so sometimes I had to suspend that adult thinking.
Mm-hmm.
But even though some of those, like, yeah, Karen, if you want to do this, you got to practice. You know, if I want to be a better knitter, I got to practice. If I want to be a better sewer, I got to practice, and work hard. Okay, I figure I work hard enough. So how much harder you want me to work? You want me to like work my fingers to the bone till I literally drop? But yeah, so I sometimes have to suspend my adult thinking when I'm reading this book and think and put myself in the students, you know, a young adult's place. And I find that if you do that, sometimes that can work. But I do understand what you're saying because the stories, I was like, I could have got more into some of those stories that really just like, wow, they really went through all of that and they, you know.
And especially because those are athletes that a lot of the younger kids might not be aware of.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly.
I didn't think about that in terms. I was like impressed, like, ooh, he's got people in here that we haven't heard, you know, or seen. A lot of us haven't seen on the court. I probably have never seen on the court, but I know who they are. But I think that for the most part, I had to kind of take away my adult brain too, but recognize that sometimes, especially in this day and age, the fundamentals, getting back to the basics, could really help us out. Which one is that? 15?
Rule number 5. Learn the fundamentals.
Yes, because I think right now, just in the climate that we are kind of relearning how we're being acclimated to bumping into each other every day and being kind and remembering that, you know, you're not the only one going through something. I think on my way here, just talking about it, I just opened up the book, picked a quote, and would say, read it. Well, how do you think that relates to your life? Well, if I don't take any of the shots, I don't get a response. So in terms of applying to colleges, like not applying means I didn't even take a shot. So you get a zero, 100%, you fail 100% of all the shots you didn't take. That's very important. So I get that. But so then that just relates to what I did with the book, which was I read the stories less and just kind of read through the quotes and was like, this is really cool. I guess I just kind of found something for every day.
Yeah. I like that. Hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard. And some of these quotes are just like, whoa. And this came from Kevin Durant, who analysts are saying that he's one of the best basketball players. You know, if you're a LeBron fan, I guess somebody might have issue with that, but there's a lot of analysts who will say that Kevin Durant is one of the best players. But yes, I can see what you're saying there. And I love these photographs. These photographs are gorgeous. The photographer did an excellent job in that. What else can we say? Did you like the color combination of this? Was this jarring or distracting?
It was not distracting to me, but I think that just speaks more again to the photography. I don't know what it's called technically when they do things color, just I guess the important parts like the basketball and then they highlight across.
So that's a couple things. One is the fact that they use color in an eye-catching way. The other is that when you print a book like this, I'm going to be real for a minute, it's easier to print it in 2 colors than it is in full color. Full color is incredibly expensive, but you can do pops of color like that. So they do orange throughout. And you can tell kind of that they're aiming at an audience that maybe it's been a while since they picked up a book, maybe it's one that is younger because the iconography in there, the orange and show that you hold up the page you got it open to. So a lot of times like that, you know, it's not straight across the page, right? It's not normal text. It's like a yearbook kind of. Right?
Right.
That's the audience they're going for, is ones where you've got to flip things a little bit to get the audience's attention to hold it. So middle school and early high school especially. So that's really smart, and it didn't distract me at all, because like you said, you kind of put your adult brain to the side for a second, and you look at it from somebody who this book is really targeted for.
Right.
It doesn't mean that adults won't enjoy this. It just means it's not necessarily for us, but we can still dig it. And the advice, like you mentioned, the knitting thing, the advice still works no matter how old you are or whatnot. You know, there's still a lot in here that you can get from it. Yeah.
Because there's always conversation in terms of when I hear about basketball, and once again when I talk about my news analysts, and they talk about, well, you got to learn the fundamentals. They always tell you that, learn the fundamentals. If you learn that, then you halfway there. I didn't know the fundamentals, so I was like, yeah. And I sit there. I also think about Venus and Serena in terms of how far they've gotten. And whenever I'm feeling like, and I'm related to knitting, because knitting to me is challenging because of my hand, because of that. And I'm sitting there watching how Venus is almost 40 years old, but she still flies that, she hits that ball over the net, acing that ball. I said, look, if that girl can do that, I can get these hands. I'm like, look, I'm about to put some oil, some eucalyptus or something. I said, I can get these little hands working. I said, because all I'm doing is sitting on my butt and knitting. She out there moving across the field. So, so those kind of things kind of motivate me as well when I'm thinking about those times when, God, I look at Venus, look at Serena, look at some other folks who've overcome challenges, and especially the athletes who have injuries and they back out on that basketball field or the football field, and they overcome it, and then they seem like they almost do better sometimes as a result. So sometimes
I think because you have to fight your way back to be as strong as you were, and I think you end up being stronger than you were. But I wanted to say too, since you brought up Venus and Serena, that what I did like too is that he was pulling quotes from athletes across different sports.
That's a good point.
So even though the focus was basketball throughout the book, I think athleticism is the same across the board. Like, you have to stick to the fundamentals.
Exactly.
It has to be something that you're willing to sacrifice and spend a lot of time on. And when you do find yourself injured or not doing so well, like fighting to be better than you were before.
Right.
I thought I saw a Red Wing quote in here, and I got
I think there is
excited.
one. Yeah. Not a lot of hockey in there, but they did a good job in hitting a lot of different sports, but also different genders, in that it doesn't feel like a guy's book.
Right.
A lot of times a male author, and it's basketball. They might direct it in that way, but they didn't. So I think there's female soccer players and track stars, and WNBA is in there, and a lot of stuff like that. So I like the fact that they broadened it, and probably that comes from him playing tennis. When you see more out there when you're in high school and growing up, then you kind of carry that with you and remember that, than somebody who only sees like one sport, one avenue to success or whatever.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. So I did play tennis, but I had a couple of friends growing up that played hockey.
Oh,
so
okay.
living in Michigan, yes, hockey is big.
Yes.
Being a young kid growing up in the city of Detroit playing hockey, mine not so much, not during my generation, but that was a game that he really enjoyed, and we would talk about it, and I tried to get into it and watch it. So I think you're right, you definitely get exposed more when you play kind of maybe a game that's not so common.
Right.
Amongst your peers. But it was Wayne Gretzky. He said you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky.
Yep, I remember reading that.
Stanley Cup winner.
Yep. Okay, so were there some favorite quotes?
Yeah, that one came from Wayne. Number 52 was the last one.
Okay.
It might look like a long shot, but you'll never make it if you don't keep shooting. And I think that's important, just because you miss it and then you can become frozen in time. Like if you think of yourself in the middle of a game, a tennis match, whatever you're doing, and something doesn't go the way that you envisioned it, and then you're frozen, in time. You can't play a game like that at all. Like, you'll get yelled at by the team and the coach and everybody watching. Like, why are you just standing there? Like,
Shake it
they're
off,
going the other way.
shake it off,
Right.
and
So,
try again the next time.
yeah, and I think I oftentimes find myself trying to encourage students, like, that's okay, like, we're just going to keep going, and you're going to make mistakes. So I would say, yeah, that was my favorite.
Did you have any favorite ones?
I didn't have a favorite, but one thing that I noticed that, you know, obviously was intentional. So this is, if you're a young athlete, this book is great because this advice can apply, you know, literally to whatever sport you're in. If you're not a young athlete, then the advice obviously still applies because you see it, you know, in a different way. So like you talked about perseverance and all that in terms of knitting. And staying with it and how much practice it takes to get good at it and that kind of thing. And that advice carries over to any skill that you're learning. And the whole, you know, you miss all the shots you don't take. He was talking about hockey, but he was also not talking about hockey, right? So like, you know, there's a reason that sports analogies are popular, right?
Exactly.
Because one, they're applicable to pretty much anything. And two, sports is like a universal language. You know, when you talk about missing shots that you don't take, that applies to basketball, that applies to hockey, that applies to soccer. And so anyone who knows anything about those sports gets it. And so when you talk about that in terms of getting a job or, you know, trying out for the team or, you know, trying out or auditioning for a play or whatever, you know, there's a reason that the kids call asking somebody out, shooting your shot, right? Because that's an analogy that they took from sports, carried it over to real life. And this book is full of stuff like that. So I like the fact that it's not just advice for athletes. It's not just advice about sports, but it's ones that anybody can pick up and carry and learn from, regardless of what you're going through. There's going to be stuff in there that, you know, you like you said, you can find things that relate to other things, right? And so there's advice in there that applies to, you know, hard times that you're going through. There's advice in there that talks about, you know, overcoming the obstacles and that kind of thing and sticking with things and that kind of thing. Yeah, so I like the variety of sources that he used, and I like the variety of topics that he hit on. Yeah.
So going back, you just made me think about a lot of times when students come across or I bring up someone who is maybe connected to something that they're interested in. Maybe it's before their lifetime or my lifetime. I always like to say, you should look that person up. Like, do you know who that is? Look them up. You know, because I think you can find a lot of inspiration behind their story and connecting it to yourself. So that might be something students should think about, or young people that pick up this book think about, like, oh, I don't know who Sonia Sotomayor is. Like, I should look her up. You'd be surprised what you find out.
I will mention one other thing too. I gave the book kind of a hard time at the beginning because of the way it's written and the style and whatnot. And I'm still standing by that. But if you were a teacher and you had this on your shelf, this would be a book that a kid could pick up, read through a few pages of, you know, when they had a minute and put back down. Because it's written in really short little segments like that, right? Even the parts that are narrative and talking about the different athletes and stuff, you're looking at 2-3 pages. And the parts about the rules, you could pick up, read a couple, whatever. This is also the kind of book that if you are teaching a reading class or in English or something like that, you could use those as journal prompts easy, right?
Oh my gosh.
Here's a quote. How does this relate to your day or to your life or something like that? You know, or as a little conversation starter to get something going in class and stuff like that. Because it's written in short little bursts like that, there's a lot of uses for that. As a coach, as a teacher, as somebody like that, yeah.
And with 52 of them, that's a whole year.
That's a whole year. And then, wait a minute.
That's true.
Yeah, right, 52 weeks. Yeah, one for each week. The other thing I liked was the basic setup about, what did he say? First quarter, the second quarter, halftime. And I love that halftime because, you know, usually by halftime, you just like, you drink. But what is halftime? Halftime, I think, was passion. And how often do we try to get our students to find out what their passion is? What are you passionate about? I don't know. What do you mean, you know? What do you like to do?
Because that passion is what will push you over.
We'll get you into that third and fourth quarter.
Yes, because I promise you, even I have my hand on Kobe, because actually Kobe Bryant's quote was one of my favorites too, but Like, I'm sure he's had some moments in his lifetime where he didn't want to play.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't want to study. He didn't want to, go against, even when he started playing professionally, like, he faced a huge challenge in the beginning of his career. So the passion, though, is what keeps you going.
Will keep you going when, yeah, no doubt. And halftime is packed. I love, yeah, I like that. I do. I love.
But I definitely appreciate, Mr. Chico, your thoughts in terms of
exactly.
it not be like the narrative not being there and not really following through. And that's probably, I don't know how I did that. I literally picked up this book and was like, oh, where's the first rule? And I just started reading it. And I was like, this is all to the book, okay. But then as I was thumbing through it, I was like, oh, he's got a whole story about his life, some things before he was born, like stories about how dunking was taken away from college basketball and brought back in. So I felt a little guilty, but I think it's good for a young person. Everybody's not meant to read a book from beginning to end, and doesn't necessarily have the patience, but I think it's a great intro, and it definitely gets you away from, because when you shop for books for young people, sometimes it's kind of like the choice is either like a very heavy content-wise book, or like the kiddie, I hate to say kiddie, but like the young little ones that are like thick pages, 5 words per page.
Right.
That's not really enough. So I think sometimes you do need something to kind of pique someone's interest and pull them in.
Right. A few years, well before the pandemic, we were invited to an author day, and Kwame Alexander was the speaker, and the book that he had written at that time was called He Said, She Said, and it was kind of funny because middle school students end up coming to this, but that book was actually not a middle school type book. Yeah, because it talked, it started out about, and it was about he said, she said, and it referred to some of the old social media terms, in terms of, it was kind of dated in that sense, but it was about this athlete who was interested in this student, in this girl, but she was like an art major, and so next thing you know, you find out that the arts program might be canceled, so all of a sudden he develops a whole big interest in this art program because he's trying to get next to the girl. But it was a wonderful story. We actually have a copy of that book, and I loved it. But some of the students said, "Well, this is kind of dated." And I was like, "Okay, all right," but still, the point is, he said, she said. You know, you get this mixed conversation about this and the texting and all of that, and the fact that he's trying to get this girl. But in his presentation, he talked about his poetry. He never mentioned any of this, so I was surprised when I started reading this. I was like, "What? Wait a minute. What you mean he was trying to?" You know, because I have met him, he's very tall. I was like, oh, he went for tennis? I didn't know he did. Yeah, I was like, okay. So cool. And his other books, the ones that you mentioned in the back, because he is a poet, he tends to write more like, was it novel and verse type stories as opposed to, but I'm sure they have me. I haven't had a chance to read the rest of them, but he tends to write novel and verse. That's his style.
Okay.
But he's a cool guy. So cool. Okay, any other comments we want to make about this book?
I was just going to say, since you love the photography so much, Ty Neave is the photographer, and he has an Instagram you can follow. So you should check that out.
I should check that out. That's right. Who in the world is Ty Neave? That's right. I'm like, oh, former Sports Center anchor for ESPN. He's a freelance photographer. Okay, and I will check out his Instagram because, yeah, I love this. Yes, it was great.
Yes. Definitely a beautiful book.
Beautiful. And that would certainly draw some young people to that as well. Yeah. Okay. We're good?
I'm good. I say it's a good book to pick up for a young person or to have on your shelf, especially if you have a lot of young people around you for inspiration.
Yeah, who find that they feel like they're dragging, and it's like, okay, they're almost into halftime, and they just need to get to that third quarter and that fourth quarter. This
we're definitely at that. Well, we're a little past halftime.
Yeah, we're a little past halftime, so we got to keep that passion going. We got to keep it going. Yes. All right, Playbook. Kwame Alexander, 52 rules to aim, shoot, and score in this game called life. Pick it up because you're gonna find some rule that you can follow.
Yes.
Thank you guys. Appreciate you.
Thank you.